Now, a look at a moment when national security interests trumped ethical concerns. Jeffrey Brown has our book conversation.
Nazi scientists, some of them tied to war crimes, including horrific concentration camp experiments, brought to the U.S. in a secret program to advance American security interests during the Cold War. It sounds like the plot of a film drama, but it actually happened, and on a large scale. The story is told in the new book, Operation Paperclip. Author and journalist Annie Jacobsen joins us now. Welcome to you.
Thank you.
So these were top scientists in the German war effort, sought out by the U.S. military as the war was coming to an end.
That's right. These were Hitler's top weapons makers, and Operation Paperclip became a classified military program to bring them to the United States. It also had a public face, so there was, on the one hand, the truth about the program kept secret, and on the other hand, the idea that we'll tell the public that these are the good Germans.
And the good Germans, but they were dedicated Nazis, the ones you write about. We should say there are many, 1,600 in all, right?
Yes.
You document about 21 of them, dedicated Nazis, some, as I said, involved in horrific stuff. What they did was known, right, to the people to the Americans who were seeking them out.
Certainly to the American military intelligence officers who were interviewing them. The idea that they were involved in war crimes was really necessary to be kept secret, and that's exactly what happened. And so in the book, I think I unveil a lot of the truth about this program that has remained clouded for decades.
So give us an example of one of the figures that intrigued you.
Well, I think one of the worst case scenarios was that the United States military made the decision to bring Walter Schreiber. This was Major General Dr. Walter Schreiber, the Surgeon General of the Third Reich. He wound up at a military facility in Texas.
And doing what?
Well, during the war, Dr. Schreiber had been involved in the vaccine program for the Reich, which sounds like a nice program, but it was actually a program to work on protecting German soldiers from these biological weapons that were also being manufactured. So he was involved in war crimes and concentration camps. He became a prisoner of the Soviets and then defected to the United States. We saw him as someone who we absolutely wanted here for his knowledge. So in the United States, it still remains unknown what exactly he did, only that he worked for the U.S. Air Force in Texas.
You know, this becomes, of course, a story of practical versus ethical choices, right? Decisions made whether to look the other way or forget about the past in order to advance and gain advantage over the Soviets, it should be said, during the Cold War.
Absolutely. I mean, the Cold War got hot very quickly, and the Soviet threat was this foreboding menace. And the idea was, certainly at the Pentagon and among the Joint Chiefs of Staff who were really running this program, was if we don't get these Nazi scientists, surely the Soviets will.
Was there much debate at the time about the ethics of it?
Absolutely, there was a debate, and I think that's what makes the narrative so compelling, because you have some people, including high-ranking generals at the Pentagon, who are loath to work with Hitler's former scientists. And you have others who say, this must be done, and it will be done.
You said we don't really know much about the case of Walter Schreiber, what he did. Some of them we do know, right? And the very famous case is, most famous, is Wernher von Braun.
Yes, he came here. He was the head of our rocket program and brought 114 fellow V-2 rocket makers with him. And this program, again, had a very beneficent face. Only now do we know the facts are very different about what those scientists were involved in at the end of the war in what was called the Nordhausen slave labor factory. Deep in the tunnels, you had concentration camp prisoners building the V-2 rockets.
So in a case like that and others where we know that they did accomplish things for the U.S. when they came here, then the question, and you write this, does accomplishment cancel out past crimes?
That, I think, is the conundrum of Operation Paperclip. And I hope that people come to their own conclusion about that, because certainly the idea that you would excuse some of this horrific behavior during the war becomes, that big moral question.
And what happened to these guys in the end? A number of them just lived out their days quite well here in the U.S.
You know, the obituary for Dr. Theodore Benziger in the New York Times, I think, kind of sums it up. He died in 1999, and the New York Times lauds him as a good German scientist who's dedicated his life to the U.S. military. It leaves out the fact that he worked with Himmler very closely during the war and was actually on the original list of Nuremberg war crimes trials. And yet, he was released into U.S. custody and came to the United States. So this idea that you can just whitewash someone's past, I think, is important to look into and to investigate so that that truth can be reconciled.
All right, it's a fascinating story. Operation Paperclip, the secret intelligence program that brought Nazi scientists to America. Annie Jacobsen, thanks so much.
Thank you for having me.